19 children and 2 adults are killed at a school shooting in Texas. Archbishop Cordileone bans Nancy Pelosi from Holy Communion, and Joe Biden promises war with China. We'll cover that and more on today's Crisis Weekly Wrap-Up. Today is May 27th, 2022, and I'm Eric Sammons. So the big news, obviously, this week was the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in which 19 children and 2 adults were killed by a lone shooter, obviously a disturbed individual. And needless to say, this immediately sparked debate within the country, with all the usual suspects saying what they usually say, which is on the left, everybody was saying, okay, we need more gun control, we need more gun control, we need more gun control. Whereas on the right, people were saying we need more security, more security, more security. And if you, I have an editorial in Crisis Magazine that was up yesterday, basically arguing both those are not really the solution, the problems are much deeper and they need to be resolved. Another thing that is coming out of this story of the school shooting is the police response. Apparently, the police were outside while the shooter was barricaded inside the school. The police were outside for at least an hour with parents begging them to go in and do something. In fact, parents trying to go and do something themselves and being stopped by the police from doing so. And so there's a lot of confusion on this. Nobody knows exactly what happened at this point. But as details are coming out, it looks, excuse me, more and more like the police really did a terrible job in this situation, which is another reason why the idea of just putting an armed guard in front of the schools isn't going to be the solution. That's not going to really solve anything, because ultimately they're not going to necessarily do anything. And so, I think we need to recognize that the police aren't the solution, that the problems are much deeper than just taking away guns or putting more police in front of schools. In other news, Archbishop Cordileone, this is the big news in the Catholic world, he has announced that he banned Nancy Pelosi from Holy Communion. Now, this came out about 2 hours after I did last week's weekly wrap-up, so I wasn't able to include it then. But a lot of people are talking about this. And essentially, this is something that's been a long time coming. In my podcast on this past Tuesday, I talk in depth about this issue. But essentially, here's the basics of it. Archbishop Cordileone has been thinking about this for a very long time. When I talked to him last year on the podcast, on our podcast, Crisis Point, he basically admitted he's been thinking about it, but he wasn't yet ready to do it. And he finally did do it. And we as Catholics, we need to commend him. We need to pray for him for doing this. It was long awaited. It was long overdue, but he finally did do it. Now, Nancy Pelosi also received Holy Communion 2 days later at a Catholic church in Washington, D.C. And that brings up the question of whether or not Archbishop Cordileone's decision, whether it applies all over the world. And technically, it really applies to Nancy Pelosi. It applies to the Archdiocese of San Francisco. So no, his decree is more geared towards the priests and deacons and Eucharistic ministers in the Archdiocese of San Francisco. That's who he has authority over. And he has told Nancy Pelosi, you should not receive communion. So on the one hand, if any person gives her communion in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, they are disobeying a valid order of their bishop. And so therefore they might be suspect to canonical penalties. But also Nancy Pelosi, if she receives communion, she also is as well. So the fact that she's received communion means she's defying an order from her archbishop. And so we'll see where that goes next. Archbishop Cordileone did say that the 3-step process in these situations is, first you talk to him, which he did for many years. He tried to, at least. Then you say that they're not able to go to communion. And the last step is excommunication. He has said that that's the last step. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if this happens. I mean, he's only 65. He has 10 more years as Archbishop if the Vatican doesn't kick him out. Nancy Pelosi seems to be a robot who will last forever. So she might be around for a while. But we just need to pray for Archbishop Cordileone. We also need to pray for Nancy Pelosi, her soul, that she would convert to Christ and turn away from her evil. Another news story this week is that President Biden was asked at a press conference that whether or not the United States would be involved militarily if China were to invade Taiwan. And it was in the context of the fact that Biden said that we would not invade militarily if Russia invaded Ukraine. And we have not technically done that, although we're doing everything we can to support Ukraine with military weapons and everything of that nature. And President Biden answered just directly, unequivocally, yes. He said, yes, the United States would intervene militarily if China were to invade Taiwan. And then he said, that's the commitment we've made. Now, the truth is the commitment the United States has made when it comes to Taiwan has been very ambiguous, purposely ambiguous. Over the years, United States policy has been to basically not answer that question. And they do that for basically for two reasons. One is to keep China on its toes, thinking, well, they might invade, they might intervene militarily if we invade, but also to kind of keep Taiwan from getting too uppity, essentially, from the United States point of view, and trying to cause problems with China. And so that's why they've always been ambiguous about it. However, now President Biden said, yes, we would intervene, which is completely insane. Let's just say that. We're already inching towards war with one nuclear power. Why would we want to also try to start a fight with another nuclear power, China? We're doing everything we can, it seems to me, to unite Russia and China together against the United States. And that would unite a lot of countries, because a lot of countries are not going to choose the United States in that situation. A situation of a Russia-China alliance against the United States, a lot of nations are choosing the Russia-China alliance because of the way the United States have treated them over the years, over the previous decades. And so the idea that the United States would just say, yeah, we'll definitely intervene militarily, when we don't even have a treaty to do that. I don't think we should have those treaties anyway. We don't have a treaty to do that. The fact that he would say that is just insane. And all it does is it just causes more problems for the United States on a foreign level, with the idea that we could stretch our military out so thin that we're simply not going to be able to defend ourselves. Now, the White House did kind of walk back the statement and try to act like they're just sticking with U.S. policy as it's always been. That's obviously not true. And we don't even know if President Biden knew what he was talking about. I mean, that's the problem of having a president who clearly doesn't have his mental faculties completely at 100%, is he might have just not even known what the question was referring to. But the fact is, the President of the United States did say this, the Commander-in-Chief did say this, and so we'll see where this goes. And hopefully they do walk this back. Now, there are rumors that maybe in the fall, China will consider invading Taiwan. We'll see about that. But definitely the United States should not intervene militarily if that were the case. One other bit of news is that in the first quarter of 2022, the United States gross domestic product, GDP, declined. Now, that's the first decline if you don't include the COVID, the first two quarters of 2020 and the COVID lockdowns. That's the first decline in a long time. And now people are saying that it won't decline in the second quarter. But if it does decline in the second quarter, that's officially a recession, because, I mean, there's different ways people have defined a recession. But one official way that you define a recession is 2 quarters in a row of economic decline. And then you add to that the fact that we have inflation. So we have the economy shrinking while inflation is going up. I mean, it seems like it's the 1970s again. It's stagflation all over again. And so the Fed has been raising interest rates just a tiny bit to try to curb inflation. But the question is, will they do that if we're in a recession? I don't think they will. Because the fact is, if you increase interest rates to try to curb inflation, you are, by doing that, slowing down the economy. Well, if the economy is already declining, how is it they're not going to want to do that? They're not going to have the will to do that. Paul Volcker, the Fed chairman in the early 80s, did that. He jacked up interest rates to basically force a pretty deep recession that would be short-term for long-term benefit, and it basically worked. I don't think, though, there's the political will today for the Fed to increase interest rates what you need to increase them to. I mean, Volcker did up to 20%. To increase them to that level, I don't think there's the political will to do that. And so the question is going to be, what will the Fed do if we really do have another quarter of declining GDP? Will the Fed continue to increase interest rates to curb inflation, or will they want to loosen interest rates in order to stop the recession. It's really a bind that we've gotten ourselves in from, I mean, obviously President Biden and his administration has a lot to blame for this, but it's not just Biden. It goes back to Trump. It goes back to Obama. It goes back to Bush. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. We're just reaping what we've sowed for so long. So that's a story I think we need to follow because it's going to have an impact on all of us. One last thing I also want to mention was last week I mentioned that Mass of the Ages 2, episode 2, was coming out, and it came out last night. So I encourage you to go YouTube, just look up Mass of the Ages episode 2. It's a great documentary that really does show a lot about what's happened in the church, particularly with the liturgy in the 1960s and beyond. So I'd encourage you to watch that. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Until next time, everybody, God love you.